Good afternoon again, Cohort 4. This video is to show you how to run a repeated measures ANOVA, or sometimes called a dependent groups ANOVA, in SPSS. So as you'll see on my screen, I have an output that I have taken from Performance Matters. And my output, what I've done is I have taken student ID numbers and I have them in my A column. I have three different groups of students, and different groups of students received different treatments. So as you can see, I have group one. Group one, we used before, during, and after reading strategies with this group of students. For group two, which is right here, I have used small group instruction with those students. They did not receive before, during, and after reading strategies. And then I have group three, which is right here. And these students just received direct instruction, guided instruction, and independent practice on the skill. They did not receive small group instruction, and they did not receive before, during, and after reading strategies. They just received instruction using the gradual release model. And so what I have here is I have three benchmark scores. I have benchmark 1, benchmark 2, and benchmark 3. So this column is my between subjects variables. So I have three different groups of subjects, between subjects variables. And then I have my three columns of within subjects variables. So benchmark 1 first, which is a pretest. I have benchmark 2, which is a middle of the year test. And then I have benchmark 3, which is an end of the year test, where the students have made the most growth. And the factor that is common here is time: first, second, third, beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. And so what I'm looking to see is if there's growth in students over the course of the year, and if there's growth that's based on any one of these contributing variables. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to run my dependent groups, or my repeated measures ANOVA, my three repeated measures. And I'm going to do that using SPSS. So let's see if I can find my data. So what you'll see here is, let me just move this back over, get that out of the way, is I have copy and pasted my data from Excel directly into my SPSS data editor. I've already changed my variables to make sure that they make sense. Again, for type of variable, because of the way that we use SPSS through a client server, it does not work as well as the computer-based application does. So I always recommend keeping your type of variable as numeric. And some people would use SPSS and they would type in a string variable. I do not recommend a string variable. I recommend always using a numeric variable, because this SPSS program does get a little bit weird with string variables because we're using a web-based version. Again, I also need to make sure that my measures are set correctly. My student is a nominal variable. My group is also a nominal variable. And then my three benchmark scores are what's called a scale variable in SPSS. So I want to make sure that all of that information is set correctly, so that way my information comes out correct. So now I'm going to go back to data view, where I can see all of my variables and their numbers. And I'm going to go to Analyze. To complete the dependent groups ANOVA, or the repeated measures ANOVA, I'm going to go to General Linear Model. And once under General Linear Model, I'm going to go to repeated measures. When I go to repeated measures, it's going to ask me my factor. Well, the factor for this, remember, we're looking at time. We're looking at how students perform and measure over time. So I'm going to change my factor name to time, so that way it's easier for me to read. I have 3 different groups, which means I have 3 different levels or 3 different treatments that I'm looking at over the course of time. So I'm going to click Add. Now it's going to ask me to define my variables. And so my within subjects variables are my 3 measures that were taken over time. And the order here does matter. First, second, and third, the order of the variables matter. So my first benchmark was my first within subjects variables over time. So I'm going to move that over to 1. Number 2 is benchmark 2 because that was taken in the middle. And then my last one is my benchmark 3. So I'm going to move benchmark 3 over. For my between subjects factor, which is my group number, I'm going to move that over there. And then I'm going to go to, let's see here. I don't want to change anything there. I do want to plot, even though I don't need to use it. I'm going to use it here. I'm going to put group on the horizontal axis, and then I'm going to put time on separate lines. Click continue. And then for post hoc, there it is. I'm going to move group over to post hoc tests for group because I have 3 groups. And for this test, I'm going to choose the Bonferroni test. And I'm going to click continue. When I have everything there, let me just look at my options. I want to include a descriptive statistics. And then I'm going to include a homogeneity tests. And I'm going to click continue. Once I have all of that set up the way that it should be, I'm going to click OK. And you'll see that it gives me an output in SPSS. When you look at the output, you're going to see that it gives you a lot of tables. It gives you more than what we're going to actually look at today. We're only going to look at what's described in Chapter 11. And so what I've done is I've copied and pasted the tables from that Chapter 11 discusses into a PowerPoint. And so I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint at this time because we're only going to look at specific tables within this output. So I don't need everything here. So I'll show you what you need over in the PowerPoint. Right. So now looking at the PowerPoint, I just want to remind you that repeated measures ANOVA is described in great detail, really great descriptions, really great examples on pages 387 through pages 393 in your textbook. I also want to point out that application 11.2, it is an example write-up for repeated measures ANOVA. This can serve as a great mentor text for your lab. And this is located on page 390. It does a wonderful results write-up, and then it also really has a great discussion write-up for the way that a researcher should interpret, analyze, and discuss this type of information. So I highly encourage you to look at page 390, application 11.2 in particular, because it gives you some really great information to work from. You will see that we have our within subjects factors. There is not a lot to analyze here. It's just telling you or giving you a table to verify that everything was set up in the analysis the way that you wanted it to be set up. And so I did have 3 dependent variables, benchmark 1, benchmark 2, and benchmark 3, and they were all based on time in the sequence of 1, 2, and 3. And so it looks like my benchmark 1 is 1, my benchmark 2 is 2, and my benchmark 3 is 3. That makes sense sequentially. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my between subjects factors. And so I had 3 groups. My first group had 16 students, my second group had 15, and my third group had 15 students. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my descriptive statistics. As you can see, it breaks down the mean, the standard deviation, and the number of each group. And then it gives you a total mean, standard deviation, and number. So if we were to look at benchmark 1, for example, my group 1, they had a mean of 55.56. Group 2 had a mean of 51.53, and group 3 had a mean of 56.8. The total mean for all of benchmark 1 was 54.65, and 46 students has a score or have a score for benchmark 1. And so when we look at all of this, it's basically just giving us all of the descriptive statistics that we've been studying for the rest of the course, but it breaks it down by each of our between groups, or excuse me, within groups variables, benchmark 1, benchmark 2, and benchmark 3. Let me just see my time. I want to make sure I have enough time. Okay. Next, we're going to look at our test of sphericity table. And oops, what you will see is that my significance level is 0.434. This is greater than 0.05, which means that I cannot assume equal variance. If I assume equal variance, my data violate one of the assumptions for repeated measures ANOVA, and this increases risk of type 1 error. So I will need to use the greenhouse geyser output on my tests of within subject effects table instead of using sphericity assumed. Okay, so which means I just need to do a slight difference in the way that I read the next table and the next output. So in order to do that, again, I have my next table, which is my tests of within subjects effects. If I would have had on the last table, if this number would have been smaller than 0.05, I would have used the sphericity assumed column to determine my within subjects effects. But again, because that was greater than 0.05, I need to use the greenhouse geyser because this model is set up for when equal variances are not assumed. All right, and so here I'm going to look at my significance level, and when I look at my significance level, I notice that my significance level is greater than 0.05, which tells me that there is not a significant effect, and I need to, or not a significant difference between groups, and I need to fail to reject my null hypothesis. Which would be that there is no difference, or there is no significant difference between groups. Because this is not significant, or the significance level shows that there is no significance, I do not need to interpret my next table. I am going to show you the next table, which would be my post hoc test to determine where the statistical significance is between groups. But because my repeated measure ANOVA significance level is greater than 0.05, I really don't need to look at the next table, but I will because I want to show you what it looks like. So if you have a significance level less than 0.05, you're going to look at this table, which is the Bonferroni test, and you're going to see exactly where the significance lies. And so you're going to look at each group compared to the other groups. So for example, when you look at group 1 compared to group 2, there was no significance there. And this is what's expected because there was no significance as part of my analysis. But you would be able to look to see exactly which groups showed significance between the others. For example, was there significance between group 1 and group 3? If there was, you would see it here. Again, my significance level is set to 1. That's double what it should be, and so there is absolutely no significance here, and I need to fail to reject my null hypothesis. As you'll also notice, I also have my lower bound and upper bound confidence interval. Again, it crosses 0, which means 0 is a possibility as being the true mean, which means there would be no effect. Hence, I need to fail to reject my null hypothesis, and it looks like I'm out of time. However, that is the final table that we're going to look at, and that's described in Chapter 11. So please let me know if you have any questions regarding this test.